Hi YouTube, Brittini here. So, today's video, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about my journey and how I was able to get through the messy middle portion of my finances. So, back in the early 2000s, I read Your Money or Your Life, and that book spoke to me. It was about financial independence before financial independence, the FIRE movement came. It was the beginning, it was the true FIRE movement, in my opinion. And this book spoke about how to use your income to sort of like escape the rat race in a kind of a way, to be able to have your money fund your life. And so I was so into the process. It was all I could think about in the beginning. And I was so far away. I mean, my bills were high. It was going to take me a really long time. And I had a lot of student loan debt and car loan debt and credit card debt. And not to mention, I believe my rent at the time was 91% of my income. So I had to work a second job. So there wasn't much room in the budget to be able to have money to use for saving and building my way out of debt. But nevertheless, I read every book I can. I made as much money as I could, and I paid down that debt as quickly as I could. And still, financial independence was on my mind. For me, financial independence is about being able to have the freedom to do what I want and not worry about how I'm going to pay for life. It's like being a kid, but with only having money. So you're able to take yourself out, do things you want to do, enjoy life, and do things that are fulfilling to you. So it wasn't necessarily about retiring, but it was about giving up employment that felt restrictive. So the commute itself, I think my commute into the city was an hour and 45 minutes each direction. And when I eliminated my commute, well, I didn't eliminate it, but I brought it down quite a bit when I moved to the city and increased my rent. And that's when I found the book. My lifestyle was well above my means. And so financial independence and that journey is a really long process. And slowly by surely, I got myself out of debt. I paid off my car loan. I built up an emergency fund. I contributed to my retirement regardless of how broke I was. And I worked a second job for so many years. I took overtime whenever I could. I switched employers. I I did a lot of things that are suggested that you do. And then my husband, who's my boyfriend at the time, ended up moving into my apartment with me. And we were engaged and we knew we were going to get married. And so that helped to reduce my expenses. I gave away my car. I started writing down every penny that went in and out of my life. I have books and books on them. I did the visual cues. I did everything. I was super hyper focused on financial independence. And somewhere along the lines, you reach a point where it is just so far away and the destination feels almost like a dream. But you know you're on track and you know you're doing the right things. What are the things that you could do to keep yourself motivated? What are the things that you can pull yourself out of being all consumed by your goal? And so these are the things that I want to share: how to deal with the messy middle. Because in the beginning, let's face it, you're motivated by your goals. But over time, it can't be all you focus on. There has to be other things in your life. Time has a way of going by, and the journey is going to happen, and you should try to make it as enjoyable as possible. And so here are some of the strategies that I did, at least initially on some of them, and then I'm going to move on to some of the things I did as I truly was in the messy middle. So number one, the goal of financial independence was so far away that I broke it down into tiny mini milestones. And I mean, I did this with so many things. When it came to paying my car off, that was a milestone. When it came to reaching my first time of reaching my 401k um, contribution, that was a milestone. When I was able to pay down our mortgage, that was a milestone. When I was able to increase the savings rate, that was a milestone. So focus on the milestone. Eventually, I got to the point where the milestone was being able to keep track of the growth of our investments. So that was a fun process, watching our net worth grow. And I made it visual for myself, from stickers to charts to graphs to books. I did it all. So many milestones along the way. That's number one. Number two is reframe the journey. And I have these written down. Shift from thinking about the end goal to instead focusing on the habits that you need. I always continually reflect on what I was doing and looked for areas that I could make improvements and then implemented those. So I focused on the habit because at the end of the day, there comes a point in the time where the process itself can get boring. So there have to be things that you do to sort of like spruce it up. And so focusing on the habits to me and doing things that I can incorporate that could get me there were things that I focused on. But yet, it was still hyper I was still hyper intense about it, thinking about financial independence. We didn't really have the words of fire. The fire movement came much later. It came actually when I was much more past the messy middle and when I had everything under control in my life. I was living my life and I wasn't super intense about the end goal of financial independence. So the next thing I did was I made sure to insert fun into my life. And so for me, as I started to focus on other goals that I had, and I mean completely separate and away from the financial independence goals. The habits were in check. I was already doing the things I needed to do, but I couldn't continue to think about financial independence. And so for me, there was a point in time where I worked out every day of my life. I'm pretty highly intense when it comes to um, some of my goals. And so my goal at the time was to be able to do pull ups. And I had an employer that allowed me to go in later in the day. So I was able to go to the gym in the morning and then be at work at 10 o'clock as opposed to 9 o'clock. I set that up for myself. So my goal was to be able to do pull ups. And so that became my goalpost. And to the point where I took courses and I learned to become a personal trainer, not to use it because I wanted to do it for a career, but simply because I wanted to learn how to do things properly. People were coming up to me in the gym, asking me questions all the time, and I was fit. And I did this throughout most of my 40s. And then I ended up hitting a period of time where something threw me off financially on track, and I lost a lot of money in some bad moves, and it put me in a series of funk. And that stopped me from going to the gym. And so that is probably one of the biggest reasons of my weight gain. But I eventually did, and I was able to do pull-ups. I won a push-up contest in the street against a teenager. I was strong. And I'll get back there. I may not get back to the fitness of my youth, but I'll get back to a point where I'll be strong for my age. So that was the third thing that I did. The next thing I did was, sometimes when you are super intense about something, it's okay to slow down. And I don't mean slow down and come to a stop. I mean slow down and move your focus onto other things. And it comes a point in time where you're going to reach your goal. Don't speed up the process. So this for me meant looking over our budget and removing a lot of the restrictions. So when I speak about that frugality was so important early on, this is the point that I mean. I know we would eventually reach financial independence, and we have, but I also knew that life was meant to be lived. And so I started looking at our budget and removed a lot of the restrictions on that made it super intense because it just didn't make sense. So there comes a point in time where people realize that the frugality that got them to a point where they could save money is no longer really truly needed to keep going. You have to get to a point where you improve your lifestyle. So slow down so that you could speed up. And this also meant that I got to a point in time where I didn't need to work all these extra jobs. Probably for so much of my life, I've worked extra jobs. I was a head waitress. I worked in a bagel store. I worked in a gas station. I, oh my God, I've done so many things. I, beyond volunteering work, I still am the board president of my co op. I cleaned my building for years. And that one, it was almost like an act of labor of love, but I still got paid for it. And I did a lot of side jobs, just different ways to earn income for years. It came a point in time where it was okay to let the second, the third job go and just focus on keeping one job. The sense of relief of not having to earn as much money made life more fun. I started incorporating things that we wanted to do in our life that made our life so much more enjoyable. And that included adding another property. When we lost a lot of money because of bad financial decision I made with giving one of our accounts away for options, and in the course of a month, I lost 100 and something thousand dollars. Probably the dumbest thing I've ever done in my life. Have someone manage money for us. It made me realize, after I got through the depression period of it, of how life is meant to be lived. when I realized we could have bought that property, we could have bought that property, it made me realize I wanted an additional property. I wanted some place else for us to go and enjoy. And so that got added into our finances as well. And it made me start focusing on other goals. Had we not lost money, I still would have slowed down and removed some of the restrictions on the budget, not worried so much about how much we were going out to eat or what we were doing. Because again, as you get real close to retirement, you're going to speed up. You're going to speed up again and get super focused on the end goal. That's the stage I'm at. While I am financially independent and I do not need to work, I also don't want to be touching from my retirement. And I'm trying to pass the point. I hate to say this because we're focusing on fat fire. I think that would be the best way to say it. To ensure that we have enough money to cover more than we need. And I'm in the event that we ever need it for healthcare, or it can go on to charities and to our family after we pass if we never use that money. But I never want to feel lacking. I never want to feel restricted in retirement. So the fat fire focus for me is to ensure that our money is still growing as we enter retirement. But the messy middle has passed. And I focused on all those things. I had fun into our lives. I changed our scenery. I made sure that I wasn't just thinking about the end goal. And now that I'm at the point where I am financially independent, I haven't retired. Again, I'm focusing on the fat fire. And I don't feel I should have to defend that. But I also don't want judgment. I guess that's it. When you put yourself out on YouTube and you share your life and your story, you want it, you're doing it, for at least I am, because you want to help people. So my goal doesn't have to be your goal. So I'm going off tangent. The messy middle, the point of the journey where progress feels slow, the goal feels so far away, and it's all you can think about. I hope these strategies helped. And if you made it to the end of the video, shoot me a thumbs up and let me know where you're from. And I'll catch you on the next one.